For 43 years, Harold Thompson and his wife Evelyn followed the same routine. Every afternoon, shortly after 3 o'clock, they walked together to a small bench beneath a maple tree near the town square. They would sit for 15 minutes. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the quiet. Then they would walk home together. It wasn't an important tradition, at least not at the time. Most important things rarely seem important while they are happening. They only become important later. After Evelyn died, Harold continued visiting the bench. Alone. The town had known Harold and Evelyn for decades. Everyone grieved differently. Some people visited cemeteries. Some kept old photographs. Some talked about the past. Harold sat on a bench. Every afternoon. At exactly the same time. Weeks passed. Then months. Still he came. And one detail never changed. Harold always sat on the left side. The right side remained empty. The side where Evelyn used to sit. People noticed, but they didn't mention it. The bakery owner across the square noticed. The bus drivers noticed. And the dog walkers noticed too. Eventually, seeing Harold on the bench became part of the town itself. Like the fountain. Like the clock tower. Like the maple tree. People expected him to be there. And somehow, that made the square feel complete. One rainy afternoon, Mrs. Flores stepped out of her bakery carrying 2 cups of coffee. She crossed the square and sat down beside Harold. Without asking, without explanation, she placed one of the cups next to him. "Too much coffee today," she said. Harold looked at the cup, then at Mrs. Flores. Both of them knew perfectly well she had made it specifically for him. But neither felt the need to say so. He picked it up. "Seems like a serious problem." Mrs. Flores smiled. That was the entire conversation. The next week, she did it again. Not every day. Not on a schedule. Just often enough that it became familiar. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Both seemed perfectly comfortable either way. Another newcomer appeared. His name was Daniel Carter. 45 years old. Recently divorced. Starting over. He had moved to town for a new job and knew almost nobody. Most afternoons, he walked his golden retriever through the square. One day, the dog spotted Harold and immediately decided they were best friends. Harold disagreed. The dog ignored that. By the time Daniel reached the bench, the dog was already sitting beside Harold, looking delighted with himself. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said. The dog wagged his tail. Harold stared at it. The dog wagged harder. "Traitor," Harold muttered. Daniel laughed. Harold tried not to laugh himself. The dog returned the next day, and the day after that. Soon Daniel stopped apologizing, and Harold stopped pretending that he did not like the dog. Eventually Daniel started sitting down. At first for a few minutes, then longer, then long enough to finish conversations. The bench, which had once been a place for remembering, slowly became a place for talking. Nobody planned it. Nobody announced it. It simply happened. One afternoon, a retired mechanic stopped by. The next week, a school teacher joined for 10 minutes. A nurse sat down after a long shift. A college student studied nearby. People came and went. Some stayed. Some didn't. But every afternoon, There were people around the bench. The strange thing was that nobody considered themselves part of anything. There were no meetings, no schedules, no invitations. If someone had suggested they were forming a group, everyone would have laughed. And yet, every day, they returned. Months passed. Summer arrived. Then autumn. The maple tree above the bench turned brilliant shades of gold and red. Leaves drifted through the square. Children chased them. Photographers stopped to take pictures. Tourists occasionally asked for directions. The bench remained. And so did its visitors. One afternoon, Daniel arrived, carrying takeout sandwiches. The following week, Mrs. Flores brought pastries that hadn't sold that morning. The retired mechanic started bringing crossword puzzles. Nobody coordinated any of it. It simply became normal. The bench had somehow become part of their lives. Then winter arrived. The first major snowfall covered the town overnight. That afternoon, Harold walked to the square. The bench was buried beneath nearly a foot of snow. Most people would have turned around and gone home. Harold stood there for a moment. Then he sat on the edge of a nearby planter and waited. A few minutes later, Mrs. Flores arrived carrying coffee. She stopped, looked at the buried bench, looked at Harold, then handed him a cup. "Seems we've got a problem." "Looks that way." 10 minutes later, Daniel appeared with his dog, and the retired mechanic arrived, carrying a shovel. Then someone brought a second shovel. Soon 6 people were clearing snow from around a bench. A passersby stopped and watched. Finally, he asked the obvious question, "Why are you doing that?" Nobody answered immediately, because nobody had a good answer. Eventually, Daniel shrugged. "It's our bench." The passersby nodded, as though that explained everything. And strangely enough, it did. Throughout the winter, they kept the bench clean of snow. Spring returned. The snow disappeared. Life continued. One afternoon, the town council announced plans to replace the aging bench. The reaction surprised the council. People objected immediately. The council had expected indifference. Instead, they received letters, comments, phone calls, suggestions. Apparently, a simple bench had become important. So the council reconsidered. Instead of replacing it, they restored it. Fresh wood, fresh paint, stronger supports, and one small plaque. Maple Street Bench. A place for neighbors. When the restored bench was unveiled, nobody made a speech. Nobody cut a ribbon. People simply sat down, exactly as they always had. One warm afternoon several months later, Daniel sat beside Harold and asked a question he had wondered about for a long time. "Why did you keep coming here after your wife died?" Harold didn't answer immediately. He looked to the right side of the bench, the side that no longer stayed empty. Then he looked around the square, at Mrs. Flores, at Daniel, at the mechanic, at the nurse, at the students, and at the dog, stretched comfortably beneath the bench. For a long moment, Harold did not speak. Then he smiled. "At first, I came because she wasn't there anymore and I missed her so." The group fell silent. Harold looked around again. This time, his eyes lingered on the people around him. "Now I come, because all of you are here." This year, the square looked much as it always had. People crossed on their way to work. Children hurried home from school. Tourists stopped for photographs. Coffee cups appeared. Conversations began. Dogs wagged their tails. And every afternoon, people gathered around a simple bench beneath a maple tree. One day, a young child walking with her mother pointed toward the group. "Why is everyone always sitting there?" The mother looked toward the bench, toward the laughter, toward the familiar faces, toward the place that had become part of the neighborhood. Then she smiled. "I don't know." And perhaps that was the only real answer. Nobody planned it. Nobody organized it. People simply kept showing up. Day after day. Season after season. Until one day they realized the bench had become more than just a place to rest. Sometimes, home isn't a house. Sometimes, home is simply the place where people expect to find you.